Hi, everyone, and welcome to the FrenchEntrée YouTube channel. My name is Zoe, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Grant Buffard, an American who recently moved to Paris, where he's been working remotely. Grant's been working with our partners at French Connections HCB, who are relocation specialists that help property buyers and expats with all the behind-the-scene details. And he's going to be sharing today some of his personal experiences of moving to France. So, hi, Grant. Thanks for joining me today.
It's nice to see you.
So to start off with today, would you like to just introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about your situation and why you chose to move to France?
Sure. So I was born and raised in Michigan, lived in Detroit for the past 10 years after going to school there and then just working downtown. And I've always, I guess for the past 5 years, I've been considering moving to France as one of my best friends from childhood is French and moved back here after high school. So counting this time, I've been to France six times. And so this was kind of a long time coming to say, like, maybe I move here and give it a try.
And why did you choose to work with a relocation specialist like French Connections HCB? What particular aspects did you feel that you needed help with?
Yeah, so you had mentioned I'm working remotely. When I first started taking this move seriously and looking around, the internet is full of information and resources, but they were often contradicting themselves when it came to remote work. So especially with something as serious as my job and taxes, right? I didn't want to mess that up. So I tried for about 2 months researching and checking different sources, but ultimately went with an agency because I needed a little more clarity.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So how did you find the whole visa application and the interview process for that?
So collecting the documents wasn't too painful, right? They give you a checklist, you run through it. Had to call my bank a handful of times, but other than that, it was pretty good. I think the interview process itself felt a little ceremonial at best. I will say, having a call with Richard and his team, they do a fantastic job of running you through the talking points. So you have a very clear idea of what they are going to ask you. That does help with the nervousness for sure. Yeah. But otherwise, for me, it did feel a little strange that, like having to go through so many different companies instead of working directly with the consulate was a little bizarre, but having an agency on my side to kind of fight fire with fire was definitely helpful.
Yeah, because in the US, the visa applications are actually handled by a separate company that do the visa process for you. Right? You're not applying directly at the embassy.
Yeah.
It can be a bit confusing, I think, to people.
Yeah, especially for myself, I had applied for a visa maybe 7 years ago. And and it was the fact that, like, I had my expectations from that process felt very different than what it does nowadays. So of course they're modernizing their process. I just would hope maybe one day it becomes a digital process, like so many other things.
Yeah, that'd be nice. And here they are starting to bring that in some countries. So fingers crossed that comes to the US and the UK as well, some point in the future. And how did the process go? Like, how long did it take you to get your visa? Did you have any problems with it, or was it all quite smooth sailing from that?
No, it was pretty easy after that. I think one thing that I was especially nervous about, and having an agency helped quite a bit, was just around timing. So there's the wording on the government site is a little confusing, and it's the fact that you apply for your visa so close to your departure date that if something were to go wrong, you would have to move your flight, right? And so I think for me, I was I was trying to apply like months in advance, and that isn't really how you do it. And so, having the agency to walk me through that process and that timeline was very helpful as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so how did you find the move to France itself?
Getting rid of all of your stuff is incredibly freeing.
Yeah.
And Facebook Marketplace was fantastic for that. It's, depending on how little money you're trying to get, you can get rid of stuff pretty quickly. I think I sold most of my belongings within a month, and was able to sell like all of my plants as well. So it really is nice. I think right now I have two suitcases, a backpack, and 2 boxes is pretty much my entire life. I am very fortunate that the rest of my stuff that I wasn't quite ready to get rid of was able to go to my parents' house. So having a support network like that is really great.
And how are you finding life in France? Is there anything that you found particularly different or challenging as an American moving to France?
Things move a bit slower here. I'll say that. So speaking of support network, I'm very fortunate to have my friends here. So they have been a huge help in the whole process, and as well as this first couple weeks of getting settled. They were actually how I was able to sublet this apartment, through friends. And so it makes those initial weeks a lot easier. I will say, as far as the first few days in France, being in a city where you can just walk is amazing. And if you don't feel like walking, being able to jump on the metro and zip over in 10 minutes is fantastic. So really love just the ease of moving around the city. And then one smaller thing for me was the simplicity of going to a restaurant, having your meal, and then everything being done what is that? Without contact, right? Contactless pay.
Oh yeah.
And it's just bloop bloop bloop, and then you're out, right? So so that has been really fun.
That's cool. And what about have you found any sort of cultural differences between France and the US?
Yeah, I would think so. I've So sadly, I'm still not fluent in French. That is one of the big goals.
How's the French learning going?
It's pretty good.
Okay, that's good.
So people are very patient. We've had a few dinner parties with friends, and people are very kind and patient with me. I will say it feels like a lot where I grasp the general topic, but I don't quite know exactly what they're talking about. Yeah. And so I think that's where when we talk about culture shock, maybe that hasn't happened for me yet, because I'm not quite catching every little nuance. Yeah. So I think one of the cultural differences around food that I've really come to enjoy is the just grabbing a few things at the shop on your way home to make dinner, versus the American pattern that we always had of go buy your groceries for the next week or 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks if you go to Costco, right? And then you're set, right? And you make your meals. And so I don't want to call it randomness, but the spontaneity of like walking into a store, grabbing a few things, putting it in your little bag that you always have on you, and then zipping home to make dinner at 10 o'clock at night is
yeah, they do eat later. That's
yeah,
sure.
It's much later, which has worked out for me because with my shifted schedule, my life has now shifted to be more afternoon, evening work, and so having dinner late is actually perfect for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so how long have you been in France now? Are you coming up to the end of your first year? Will you be applying for your carte de séjour and that, or is that further in the future?
Yes, that's further. So
Okay.
I've been here, I'll say 3 weeks.
Oh wow. Okay.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah. So the rest of that process, the agency is helping me with. That is going to be great. So unfortunately, I believe the government website is down right now, but not an issue as we have lots of time to finalize that. So I think the rest of the bureaucracy stuff we'll get to a little later. So right now it's settling in, hunting for an apartment, the more day-to-day stuff.
Brilliant. Okay, so last question. What advice would you give to someone who's in a similar position that's hoping to move to France?
So having access to your money, I would say is a big one, right? That's an obvious one. I would say budgeting more than what you thought, I think is also a really good point, as the conversion rate is sometimes a bit of a head game where you mentally associate, $1,200, $1,500 for one thing, but when you really put it in perspective as euros versus US dollars, there is a bit of a 20% difference. So making sure that you budget more than you originally did, I think is good. And then with regards to access to your money, I would say a must is definitely an international card that isn't just going to rack up fees, right? But then also eventually getting a bank here within the EU. So I just went through an online bank and was able to get a debit card through them. And so that really simplifies how I pay for things. But there are things like a phone plan, or the Navigo Pass, that I needed a bank account, right? So I need that IBAN number. And so having a bank here wasn't necessary compared to just having an international credit card.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And I know a lot of Americans do actually struggle initially getting that bank account in France. So that's good advice to maybe look at the online ones instead. Okay.
Yeah, and then another thing, and this one's a little silly, but I would say more practical, is to bring a power strip from home, right? So right now I'm running into the issue of I have a monitor, a computer, a tablet, my phones, all my stuff that I use for work, and they're all a US plug. So I either have to go out and buy 5 adapters or buy new power banks, or if I had just planned ahead a little bit and brought myself a US extension cord, right, power strip, then I just have to buy one adapter. So little things like that, they get you caught up.
Yeah, and I think that's great advice, because I think exactly as you say, that the little things that people don't think of, and then when you arrive, I wish I'd thought of that one.
Yeah, and then if I can express the last thing would be, if possible, figuring out your data plan before you get here. Being that the data plans become incredibly expensive when you're working internationally, right? And now it was one of those things where I was able to get a data plan and ended up having to wait an additional week just because of shipping, right? And I think that's one of the bigger culture shocks, whereas in the US, especially with the prevalence of Amazon, we're so used to getting everything in like 2 days. So here I waited 8 days for something to ship, and then it took a whole other day for it to actually show up at the apartment. So it's a lot of time to go without data plan. Thankfully, I'm able to stay at my friends and they have Wi-Fi, so I can still work. But just dealing with your phone and trying to get connected and still have lines of communication back home, If at all possible, getting something set up before you get here takes a lot of that stress off of you.
Yeah. These are really good tips, especially for people who, like you, will be moving to France to work and need to hit the ground running. Anything else you want to add?
No, I think that pretty much covers it.
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much for talking to me today, Grant. And I wish you all the best of luck with your new life in France. And maybe we'll get to catch up sometime in the future when you're applying for that carte de séjour and becoming permanently resident in France.
Absolutely.